Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Milton Auercade, and I am the author of this book, UAPs, A New Secret Agenda. And the title is a key to understand the book itself. The reference to a new secret agenda implies that there has been an old secret agenda, an opportunity. When it came, I wrote about that. The difference is that then I wrote my book in Spanish. The title translated into English was UFOs, The Secret Agenda. This book was originally printed in Spain and won the Zurich Prize, awarded by a select group of UFO investigators and scholars that belonged to the Anomaly Foundation. Later, the book was also printed in Montevideo, Uruguay. The secret agenda at that time was, on the one hand, to conduct an official investigation done through the three main consecutive projects. The first was Project Sign, followed by Project Grudge, and at the end was the famous Project Blue Book. The other part of the secret agenda was done by individuals and private organizations, of which the most important were the National Investigation Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, whose leading representative was U.S. Marine Corps Major Donald Kehoe, prolific author of books about UFOs, and the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, managed by the couple of Jean and Carl Lorenzen. The official investigation didn't find conclusive evidence that Earth was visited by interplanetary beings and flying saucers. To put an end to it, the work was assigned to the University of Colorado, which convened a group of scientists under the direction of physicist Dr. Edward Condon. They produced an extensive report. The conclusions, nevertheless, were written by Dr. Condon before the group has finished its work. And he said, "Careful consideration of the record as it is available to us lead us to the conclusion that further extensive study of UFOs probably cannot be justified in the expectation that sciences will be advanced thereby." This is written in the Scientific Study of Unidentified Flying Objects, published by Bantam Books on January 1969. 965 pages on section 1, page 1. Following this report, the Project Blue Book was closed in December 17, 1969. United States Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppel, who was the most important head of Project Blue Book, wrote a book under the title The Report on Identified Flying Objects in 1956. On page 315, at the end of the book, Ruppel wrote, "Maybe the final proven answer will be that all the UFOs that have been reported and merely misidentified non-objects, maybe the Earth is being visited by interplanetary spaceships. Only time will tell." This said Ruppel in 1956. But in 2012, Ruppel wrote another book under the title The Uncensored Truth About UFOs, where the former chief of the Blue Book, on page 547 of that book, said, "I will go further than the Air Force. However," and quote from a letter from ex-Lieutenant Andy Flews, once an investigator for Project Blue Book. Flews' statement sums up my beliefs and, I'm quite sure, the beliefs of everyone who has ever worked on Project Sign, Grudge, or Blue Book. Flores wrote, even taking into consideration the highly qualified backgrounds of some of the people who made sightings, there was not one single case which, upon the closest analysis, could not be logically explained in terms of some common object or phenomenon. And the last words Ruppelt are these: no responsible scientist will argue with the fact that other solar systems may be inhabited and that someday we may meet those people. But it hasn't happened yet, and until that day comes, we are stuck with our space age myth, the UFO. Returning to the same time, the Second World War was over. On June 24, 1947, happens the first case that will open the area of the flying saucers with a report by the civil pilot Kenneth Arnold. After the World War II, there was a clear enemy of the United States, and that was the Soviet Union. The American military needed to know how many nuclear tests, what kind of airplanes and missiles the USSR had, and there was no other alternative that find a way to fly near the enemy territory in missions of reconnaissance. In other words, there was a need to spy the Soviet Union. For that purpose, the Air Force developed some extraordinary airplanes. The first one was the U-2 that accomplished 24 missions until one of the planes ended down, and that was of the pilot Gary Power in 1960. In the meantime, the Air Force was testing the A-12, which was produced from 1962 to 1964 and flew from 1963 to 1968. The A-12 was called Cygnus. The Central Intelligence Agency officially ordered 12 A-12 under a contract signed on February 11, 1960. Curiously, using third parties and dummy companies, the CIA managed without problems to obtain the titanium needed to build the A-12 from the Soviet Union. When the U-2 was tested, as was the case of the A-12, it was not painted black to avoid radar detection. Any person who in those times could have the chance to see one of these airplanes flying very high, just a brilliant point in the sky, that moved extremely fast like an airplane cannot do in any case of the A-12, in the case of the A-12, will report them as UFOs. Therefore, the story of the possible existence of strange flying objects served as a perfect cover-up for those experiments. And the other interest of the project of the Air Force was to detect from all of the UFO reports which one could potentially be some artifact of the Soviet Union spying on the United States. After the A-12 came the best of the best, the SR-71, named Blackbird, capable of flying of more than Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound, flying at 85,000 feet, making it impossible to be reached by Russian missiles, and a low observable shape plus stealth characteristics. The SR-71 entered service in 1966. A total of 32 SR-71 were built. 12 were lost in accidents, never under enemy fire. For political reasons, the SR-71 was retired in 1998, although several were briefly reactivated before its second retirement. The SR-71 flew 3,500 operational reconnaissance missions between 1966 and 1990. They were never over Soviet territory, but near it, so they could gather substantial information. Therefore, from June 20, 1956, with the U-2 until 1990, aerial reconnaissance missions were conducted by those aircraft over a period of 34 years. A good part of those years were covered by official investigation of UFO reports that ended in 1969. That was the old secret agenda. The test of those airplanes was protected by the story of interplanetary, as they called it at the time, flying saucers. Then came the new era of UFOs, when they developed airplanes like the extraordinary stealth fighter F-117 Nighthawk, which started in the late 1970s, and the maiden flight was in December 1977, although the first F-117A flew in 1981. With the stealth characteristics, it was a total revolution in military aviation. The bomber B-2 Spirit was presented to the American public in 1989. It became operational in January 1st, 1977, and was delivered to the Air Force in December 1993. The combat debut was in 1999 during Operation Allied Force over Serbia, an airplane with stealth characteristics that make it difficult to be detected by radar. This new era continues to the present day with the new strategic bomber B-21 Raider, which could deliver conventional and thermonuclear weapons. It has the possibility to replace the B-1 and B-2 bombers and maybe legendary B-52 Stratofortress. The B-21 has the major development contract in 2015, hoping to be in service in the midst of 2020s. But by 2021, the date to start its service has been transferred to 2027. The other airplane, brand new, is the F-47, a sixth-generation fighter that succeeds the F-35. The F-47 will be the first aircraft capable of flying with drones in formation. It will be a kind of quarterback for the fleet of drones. All this without taking about the UAPs, unmanned aerial vehicles, and UAVs, unmanned combat aerial vehicles, used by the three armed forces. Powerful drones driven at distance by people in front of a computer. Until now, I have been discussing the Air Force. But what about the US Navy? Its pilots were those who saw strange phenomena, flying and submerging in water or vice versa, seeing and suddenly apparently disappearing. Well, this is especially the kind of technology that needs to be protected with a cover story. And therefore, now we talk no longer about UFOs, because the F means flying, but about UAPs, with the A meaning anomalous. And that is because they are transmedium, from air to water, from water to air. They are part of a vast project by the US Navy that essentially applies the criteria for a new war, and this would be electronic. These gadgets must be protected, but also subjected to experimentation. That is, in my criteria, what has been happening with the Navy pilots and others. Therefore, we now discuss UAPs, and we have a new official agency dedicated to them, named AARO, or AARO if you prefer, the All Dominion Anomaly Resolution Office, which is part of the Secretary of War and is required to submit an official report of his activities to Congress twice a year. People who appear in TV programs, people who are part of special videos, people who are writing books on UFOs and UAPs don't talk about all these things that I referred to you, to provide an objective perspective of what is going on, and it is possible maybe to be seen, detected by radar or by special sensors. You will only find this material in my book. That is why I call it UAPs, a new secret agenda? It's a question. Read it, and you will have information in such a way that all those who are permanently talking about extraterrestrials, aliens, or non-humans will never tell you. Sincerely, my hope is that you will read this book. The cost of this book in paperback edition is $22, but the cost of Kindle version through the internet is just only $5. Very, very cheap. And I encourage you to use the Kindle version because my personal interest is that you become well informed reading this book. It took me 9 months to elaborate the manuscript, working an average of 11 hours a day. It was a real effort, but I did it with pleasure and with very interest to share with you all the things that I know about the old UFOs and the current UAPs. And what you need to know about the new things that have been experimented and why they could surprise even to veteran pilots and why they are really extraordinary. Thank you for listening and seeing, and I hope you enjoyed the book. Tú apretaste esto, ¿no? Espero. Si no me pego un tiro. Hay que mejorar la pronunciación.